Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of What's the Scoop. Um, this is, I want to thank you guys for coming in and talking and, taking in the first show with me. This is going to be obviously a little bit different dynamic than the show that I'm used to doing with the guys on the weekends, which I'm still going to be a part of that. This is not in any way, shape, or form uh, a deviation from that. And I want to thank, in particular, two of my brothers from K&K, all of them, but particularly Kurt and Kenny. They were really influential in helping me get this pushed together over the last couple of weeks after I had been working on this behind the scenes for a good long time. So thank you guys. And before I get into the topics of today and kind of explain the show a little bit more, obviously, far more important than anything is the fact that we've got today's Veterans Day. I want to thank everyone who may be watching this, who is involved or has been involved with U.S. military in the past, um, or who has any connection and any loved ones to people who have been connected to the military. And I know I speak for everyone at K&K on this front, where I tell you that we're all very grateful and forever respecting and admiring your sacrifice and your dedication. So thank you to anyone who may be listening who has served in the past or is anyway connected, and God bless you. That being said, going back to what I was talking about with how the show is going to work. So basically, the show on Monday or on Wednesdays is very structured, and we've decided that this is going to be kind of an opportunity for me to come on once a week. And usually, I'm not going to be by myself. I happen to be today. I'm not usually going to be by myself. What I'm normally going to be doing is having somebody on with me. It might be someone from K&K, which got Kurt coming in right now saying, "Scoops, let's go! Happy Veterans Day to all." Kurt, I was just thanking you for you and Kenny in particular for all of y'all help getting this together. It's going to be a lot of fun, and looking forward to having you on one of these weeks. It's going to get exciting. I mean, I think anyone who's watched the main show on Wednesdays knows that it's always usually on either Kurt or either on Kenny or Paul or both to look at us when Kurt and I start, locking horns and being like, "All right, Fraser and Ali, let's separate this and deal with it another time." So that's I look forward to having Kurt on. I look forward to having other guys from K&K on, and also some new people from outside the network. It's going to be very exciting. It's going to have a lot of great topics to talk about, and have new people coming in who are talking about the sports that we don't usually talk about. I'm going to normally be focusing on football, basketball, and baseball. I might have somebody come on talking a little more about hockey. I've got some great people coming in who could talk about other sports, WWE, whatever it is. This is going to be more expansive, and be a little more free flowing. I want there to be kind of more of a dialogue when I have people on, and a little more free flowing, where we can get some of that good, real emotion and intensity back and forth. And we got Kenny coming in right now saying, "Hey, Scoops, good luck with your new show. I know you're going to kill it. Have a great show, my friend." Thank you, my friend. And thank you both, Kenny and Kurt, for helping me get this set up and for allowing me to watch this tonight. I've been looking forward to it. So thank you all very much. So I think that explains everything pretty much. Also, you guys, whether you're coming in from Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever it is, please comment below. That's another thing I'd love is, just tell me what's going on, and engage with me. And I'm happy to either, if you want to know my thoughts about something, or if I say something, which this is going to happen, I promise you, as you know from the Wednesday show. If I say something that you don't agree with, or that that fires you up, as pretty much every other word out of my mouth does when I'm talking to Kurt, then fire at me in the comments, and we'll have a good discussion on that. And what about Michigan? Big Ten commish is a fraud. Michigan going to stick it right up his ass. Sorry, I think my grandma was watching. Going to stick it up right up his what. But yeah, actually, that's my first topic. So that's a great segue right into that. So with that, going into talking, for those who haven't seen it, there's been a, excuse me, out over the last week or so with a scandal going on over at University of Michigan, and there's been a over the last day or two with a suspension for Jim Harbaugh, their head coach. He has not been allowed to. He was not allowed to coach today. Did win the game, and so basically the background a little bit for those who haven't been following is has been accused of buying tickets to games against the team's conference and possible future college football playoffs opponents with the sole purpose of stealing their signs and scouting so the Wolverines could have an advantage in games. That's staffer by the name of Connor Stalions has resigned, and the NCAA is also investigating. Coach Harbaugh, to this point, has denied any involvement in that sign stealing scheme. That's from according to the USA Today. As I mentioned, he was not allowed to coach today. There has been a push for a restraining order to attempt essentially from Michigan to hold off on any punishment toward Harbaugh until a full um, investigation was run and completed. And that's, obviously things have gone a little bit differently. And Harbaugh has been told that he can be involved during the week, but that he's not allowed to be involved on actual game day, which is what happened today. Michigan has stated that they're prepared to take the Big Ten to court unless a full investigation is properly done. And the rule that's being looked at right now by the NCAA, so it's Rule 11.6.1, which reads in part that off-campus, in-person scouting of future opponents in the same season is prohibited. And it also cites exceptions, such as where an institutional staff member may scout future opponents also participating in the same event at the same site. So, with this topic, so what do I make of this? To an extent, I can see Michigan's side. I don't like it. I don't like the sign stealing. I don't like the whole, this whole thing in general, just on a personal matter. But they have every right to be given due and fair process, as they should. And I've not really been a whole fan of the suspend somebody while you're seeing if they did something wrong. And I'm going to get back to that with another topic later in the show. But I'll tie it back into baseball. As everyone knows, probably the biggest sign stealing scandal over the last year or so, the last few years involved the Houston Astros. And the common argument for people who were defending the Astros was that, everyone is doing it. To the extent to which it was being done was really more the issue at hand. There's, always, people trying to look at something through black and white, and there's always usually some gray area in the middle. That was the case here. We had the Yankees and the Red Sox penalized for past sign stealing in 2017, but were not found to have continued to escalate past the Manfred memo that went out by Commissioner Rob Manfred in that autumn, that was released later that year, warning teams against that conduct. Number two, they were not found to have taken it to nearly the systematic level that Houston did. Houston, as we know, had a whole operation, had a whole sense of technology and advanced, like all this other stuff that was going on that was completely, outside the bounds of what was permitted and what was, sort of not necessarily permitted, also not necessarily permitted, but not really, kind of on those blurred lines, as they say. The Red Sox, I think, got more heat than probably was fair due to the, just guilt of association with Alex Cora, who's their manager, was the bench coach of the Houston Astros at the time, being one of their ringleaders back in Houston with the whole thing. So I don't think it should immediately be just written off as every team does it, but I don't believe the team should suffer on the field for something that may or may not have occurred, let alone to any level where punishment was warranted. At the same time, do I think that however this is handled in Michigan, one, I doubt this is the last time that we hear somebody come out and say, oh, this school was doing this or whatnot. And I doubt this is if this school was doing what they're said to be doing, I doubt that they're the only school that is doing it. I do agree with that as a general fact. On top of that, it's obviously a very high profile school. They got the rivalry with Ohio State, you got the Big Ten. So there's a lot of general publicity behind them. If this were happening at, a much smaller school, and I don't want to disrespect any small schools, but at a, much smaller school that doesn't have that attention and those ratings every week and those high profile games and personnel, do I think this would be getting the same attention? And do I think people's opinions may be different? Unfortunately, yes. Which, again, not something I love, but just something that I believe is factually accurate. Um, we got Jody coming in saying here, Houston never cheated. That's true. The Texans have never cheated. They would have probably been a lot better if they had. I love this. Kenny and I made the same joke, and I didn't even see his comment before. Yeah, no, the Texans they look like they found their quarterback finally, which, I was not a believer in CJ Stroud, but kudos to them. He had a heck of a game and is having one of the greatest rookie seasons any of us has ever seen. In history, which I know Joey Clams is surprised to hear me say that because I think he just thinks I started watching football 15 minutes ago. Loves, as you guys know, he loves going back and forth with me on that. Looking forward to having him on the show as well. Hope you're doing well, Clamsy. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that. But since I did mention baseball on that topic, the next topic that I wanted to go into, let me shift gears to this. This past week, obviously, the Major League Baseball, for those of you who follow it, or even if you don't, the Major League Baseball offseason kind of really kicked off this week. There's a 5-day grace period that happens between the end of the World Series and when the offseason really starts in earnest. Typically, that's mostly a period of time in which either we see some last-minute personnel changes or we see free agents who are, players who are going to become free agents either try and negotiate. That's an exclusive window where they can only negotiate with their current teams, and basically gives the teams sort of that whole first right of refusal type of thing. So anyway, this offseason kicked off this past week, and as usual, the New York Yankees can't keep themselves out of the headlines for one reason or another. Would love it if it were some more positive reasons, but as usual, not exactly. So there was a lot of speculation behind the Yankees going into this offseason because there was a lot of dialogue as to whether or not Aaron Boone, Brian Cashman, and the like would be retained, because obviously they had a horrible season, 82-80, their worst season record-wise in over 30 years. And but that was added a bit of a complication by the fact that the Yankees did not have the end of season press conference at the same time that they usually do, or at the time that pretty much every other team did aside from the St. Louis Cardinals this year. So that led to some speculation of, is there a last minute change that's going to happen with Cashman? Is there a last minute change that's going to happen with Boone? Like, no one really knew exactly what was going on. Hal and Cashman did finally speak to the media this week after over a month after their last game against Kansas City, which, shout out to my new hometown, Kansas City. It was actually at that final game. This was an interesting dynamic to me because normally, now again, do I think Brian Cashman's the best general manager in baseball? No. Do I think he was a great general manager for a period of time? Yes. Do I think he made a lot of great moves? Not recently, but 2000s, early 2010s that helped keep the Yankees afloat? Do I think that he picked up on guys or at least was involved in acquiring guys that other teams wouldn't have thought to go? Yeah, Didi Gregorius, I know he had a role in that. I could go on. That being said, he is normally the person, if I'm looking at Hal Steinbrenner and Brian Cashman, he's normally the one that I look at and say, I think he gets too much flack. And then Hal Steinbrenner, this guy drove me nuts earlier this year, and I know a lot of Yankees fans felt the same way as me. He goes on, and the Yankees had a terrible season all the way through. It wasn't at any point where I was like, oh, okay, we're turning things around, except for maybe like a couple games at a time. And he come out earlier in the season, and he basically said, I don't know why the Yankees fans are so upset right now. You don't know why the Yankees fans are so upset. You've owned the team for over 10 years since your father passed away, God rest his soul. Now, I'm not saying that if George were alive, this would never have happened. I hear that line all the time. I don't agree with it. I don't believe in it. I love George Steinbrenner. I respect him. God rest his soul. But just not an argument that I'm going to make, not an argument that I usually do make. That being said, to go from that and to go from someone who's usually pretty honest about things with Brian Cashman to this week where we had Hal Steinbrenner coming out and saying, it was a disaster. We have to evaluate everything. Nothing's off the table in free agency, all of that, which as I paraphrase it, it kind of sounds like corporate speak, but it wasn't corporate speak. It was, you could tell it was more involved than that. And then to have Brian Cashman come out and say, just a couple of hours removed from that, I think we're pretty effing good. Are we watching the same Yankees this past year, Brian? Because what I was watching, with the worst season in 30 years record-wise, like I said, your biggest acquisition this year was AWOL for half the season. It's Carlos Rodon. They picked him up from the Giants. He had 2 off-the-field issues. The Yankees used to never, when I was growing up, had multiple off-the-field issues this last 2 years. He alone had 2 off-the-field issues, with one with gesturing at fans and one with turning his back on a coach. He's on a $162 million contract. And when he did play, he had a 5.79 FIP, which basically, when I'm going to reference FIP a lot when I talk about baseball, just consider that ERA it's ERA that takes out anything that the pitcher isn't responsible for. So it's basically absent fielding mistakes and whatnot. So he had that on his record, which wasn't even their worst starter, thanks to Luis Severino and Johnny Brito, which Severino was reported a couple of days ago as having interest from several teams, but the Yankees had no contact with him, which I think up as recently as 2 years ago, nobody would have seen that coming this year. But he has just completely fallen off. But you have all of that going on. You haven't developed one great hitter under the Aaron Judge, under the Damon Oppenheimer regime. Damon Oppenheimer, how he is avoiding like Teflon, all of this different ire in the media that's going directly to Boone and Cashman and completely missing people like Damon Oppenheimer, I have no idea. Maybe it's just because he doesn't have the name recognition because he's not as high profile. I don't know. But the director of amateur scouting having a record this bad and having his job for almost 20 years, I don't want to know what he has on Brian Cashman and or Hal Steinbrenner, because it's got to be bad for him to still have a job. Your last good starter you had developed was Montgomery. You punted on him 2 years ago for Harrison Bader at the deadline, which at the time made sense because you did need speed and defense. You did need a center fielder and all of that. And you probably could make a convincing argument that he was going to be the 5th starter in a 4-man rotation in the postseason. Now you need 2 outfielders. And you just saw Jordan Montgomery win a World Series title with half the other freaking Rangers made up of former Yankees. So safe to say that didn't really work out so well. You need 2 outfielders this offseason. I agree with everyone who says Bellinger's would be a good target. You need to go after Yamamoto for the rotation because there's no other pitcher you're going to get who's got the youth, the ability, and the health record that Yamamoto has. And when you call up prospects, actually play them, because I'm sick and tired of calling up guys like Oswald Peraza for them to come up and play and be platoon players while DJ LeMahieu is getting paid to put up numbers both in the field and at the plate that make my 12U stats look like I was taking a level of steroids that would make Mark McGwire go cross-eyed. So I'm not really quite sure where the disconnect is, but I keep saying this is a big offseason for the Yankees, and it dang sure is. Going back to well, I'm going to actually jump in and get some comments here for a second. Did David Ross get a raw deal by the Cubs? I'm glad you asked that, Jody. I was actually going to jump on that later on, but since I will come back to that. I promise. Give me the biggest. This is from Kurt. Give me the biggest Yankees and biggest Mets acquisitions this offseason. For the Yankees, again, I'm going to, in terms of who I think that they should get, I would say Yamamoto. And in terms of who I think the Red Sox should get, I would say Ohtani, just because I think that the biggest owner, the biggest market, the biggest player, in my opinion, perhaps the greatest player of all time, just on pure talent, that just fits too well for me. And again, that's personally what I think would be a good fit for a baseball perspective. I know that he wants the West. I know he wants a small market. So my mind, as I've said right along, I still think the Seattle Mariners are the best fit, and I think that the Diamondbacks and now perhaps the Rangers after their title are dark horses. But going back to, for me, it's Ohtani for the Mets and Yamamoto for the Yankees. Because Yamamoto, as much as attention as Ohtani is getting, Yamamoto has actually been a better pitcher. in Japan than Ohtani was. Going on down here, Russell Westbrook, Shin-Soo Choo, and Clint Frazier for Juan Soto. What'd you say, Jay? Of course, this is Jay Kruger. How you doing, Jay? I say you sound like you're having a pretty fun Saturday night to ask me a question like that. Yeah. No, two of my least favorite professional athletes in there, and then Shin-Soo Choo, who just flapped out after getting a big contract. Kurt Valenti saw something yesterday that said the Giants are going to try and do everything to get Ohtani. Well, another thing. So I actually like that for them because they tried last year. They kept trying. They ever since that. So they had that dynasty in the beginning of 2020s or 2010s rather. So they had Lincecum, they had Bumgarner, they had Posey, they had. If you want to consider them, I think they're on a lesser tier, not to disrespect them, but I think they're on a lesser tier, like the Hunter Pences, the Brandon Crawfords, the Brandon Belts, Pablo. How to forget about Pablo Sandoval? So you have these guys, and they became synonymous with San Francisco Giants baseball, and ever since they lost, especially Posey. But I think even that started to happen with losing Lincecum and Mad Bum. They just haven't really had a face of their franchise. And, like you think of different organizations, I mean, the Dodgers, I would probably say it's Kershaw, maybe Betts now, but I think Kershaw just because he's got that long term there. Cards had Molina, all these different teams that you're seeing a lot of success have that face. And the Giants keep trying to go out there and get it, and they keep missing. They were, again, the biggest competitor to the Yankees, other than the Padres last year for Aaron Judge. But from what I know, at least, it sounds like the Padres were less of a really persistent threat and more of a just throw a crap load of, Scrooge McDuck money at the very end and hope what sticks. I think that'd be a good move for them to try and do it. But again, until I'm convinced that he would fit in a big market, which was very clear that he didn't want that. Now, maybe he just wanted to adjust to life in America before doing that. That would be completely understandable. But I've heard nothing that really convinces me on his side. I've heard what people want to come up with on like the league rumors and whatnot. But things that I've heard that in any way relate to him specifically, I haven't heard anything that says he comes off of not wanting to play in a big market. So until I hear that, it's hard for me to see it. Kenny's got a question right here. I'm still going to go with in the next few weeks, Ohtani to the Mets will heat up. I agree with you on that. My theory is having Ohtani on East Coast will make him even more popular than he already is with youngsters who can now watch him every day. I think that's a great point, Kenny. Jody asked me what position does DJ play? Because I was ranting on LeMahieu earlier. He plays second base and third base and first base to varying degrees. He was primarily a second baseman for us. Then when Torres was getting more playing time there and Volpe was getting time there, they moved him to third a little bit, and now he's pretty much going to be a utility guy, but probably spelling Rizzo when he doesn't play at first base or when he DHs or whatnot, which I really hope he rebounds this year, because if he doesn't rebound this year, then holy crap. We've got excuse me. We've got Jody coming in and saying Sonny Gray. Oh, yeah, that's another player that they went out and got that I was completely completely disappointed. I remember in fact, if my dad's watching, shout out to my dad. I remember being at Buffalo Wild Wings, was with him, and we were waiting for the trade deadline. It was on July 31st, and a few times we went out on July 31st because I'm a huge trade deadline freak. So we went out and watched, and we're just waiting to see what was going down. And I remember it being confirmed by Joel Sherman and Jack Curry that the Yankees were getting Sonny Gray. And I flipped out because they traded Mateo, Caprillion, and Fowler. And I thought, wow, they pretty much gave up nothing. When I was, unfortunately, one of many examples the last few years where players from Oakland go to New York and does not translate well. Kenny going up here and saying Bellinger, Yankees, Mets, Ohtani, and Uncle Stevie will empty the pockets for him. Oh, Bellinger, Yankees, and Mets, Ohtani, and Uncle Stevie will empty the pockets for him. Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Um, and then we've got Jody Moncrief. Is Joe Espada a good hire if we pull the trigger on him? Jody, I think that I'm honestly shocked Espada hasn't gotten a managerial job already. Just since he was one of the guys that just felt like a foregone conclusion was going to happen at one point. Uh, I think that'd be a good hire for y'all. The one thing I will say is that I think that there's a benefit to him having, because they've been so successful the last few years. I think that there's a benefit to him having been there under multiple guys, under Hinch, under um, Baker this year. It's clear that they wanted to keep him around and tried very hard to do so, and it's clear he wanted to stay. Because I'm guessing that he had opportunities to, even if it wasn't being a manager, to go elsewhere, where he may have had a better path to a managerial job. So I think Espada would be a good hire for y'all. I thought that a potential wild card could have been Carlos Beltran, but that hasn't been something that I've really heard a lot of fire behind. That was kind of more over in my own head. So yeah, but as long as you guys have that lineup and that rotation, I mean, I think that most people could be successful managing for y'all. But no, I think Joe Espada would. If I had to rank a top three, he probably would be either one or a very convincing argument for one. So I got through most of those comments. Thank you guys for interacting with me and some of the great questions you get. Please keep firing those in. I love answering questions with you guys and hearing the different perspectives y'all have on what I'm firing out there. And so anyway, going back to where I was at with the Yankees. So I was talking about what they had to do this offseason, and this came together the last few days, and I don't know if a fan started this on social media. I don't know if this actually came from a source I assume it would be from Boston, but this Yankees Red Sox trade rumor that I keep hearing about, and I'm surprised that I actually keep hearing about it from multiple places. Again, I don't know if it's just slow news day or clickbait or what it is, but the rumor is outfielder Alex Verdugo for infielder Gleyber Torres, the trade between the Yankees and the Red Sox. The Yankees and the Red Sox have made 3 trades since I've been alive. Greg Allen for Diego Hernandez was the most recent one. Frank Allen and Adam Ottavino for cash considerations. Basically, the Yankees wanted to dump Ottavino's contract. And Stephen Drew for Kelly Johnson, which was back in 2014. So, obviously, they don't trade very much. But breaking it down to what each side would be looking at, Torres, on a team this year where offense was a major issue, his offense was 23% above league average offensive production, according to WRC, which is basically a metric to evaluate offensive production. He walked 10% of the time, which Yankees fans were always saying, we need guys who walk more and strike out less. He only struck out 14% of the time, 13 steals and solid defense. And you want to trade him for Alan Verdugo, who, although at a position of need, he does play left field, which is definitely a position of need, was below league average across the board, especially offensively, which you typically don't want a below average offensive left fielder. Typically not a position you want to sacrifice offense. He's actually older than Gleyber Torres, not by much, but he is older than Gleyber Torres. So and this is all despite being a lefty hitter. I'm still talking about Verdugo, who was barely league average this year against right-handed pitching, which is what the Yankees need to try and target and claim that they're going to do, is target guys who can hit right-handed pitching well. And he does it okay. But to trade Torres for that, and lest we forget that Verdugo has had at least 3 documented issues with accountability that led to either benching or other discipline by Alex Cora. And this even going back to his time in Los Angeles. I just talked about the Rodon issues. The Yankees finally just cut ties with Domingo Germán. They let go of the Chapman disaster last year, which perhaps the worst player in big moments I've ever seen as a Yankee. Gary Sanchez, who was a nightmare to watch behind the plate, and apparently, not particularly great to coach either. So this used to be a deal breaker for the Yankees when you had, this type of immaturity or these character, one thing or another. I remember I don't remember because I was 2 years old, but back in 2003 when there was the whole, where is A-Rod going to go? Because Texas was trying to get out of his contract, so they were going to ship him to Boston for that, Maglio or that Lester Nomar, that whole package. And then they ended up flipping him to the Yankees for Alfonso Soriano and Joaquin Arias. But the reason why the Yankees were willing to let go of Soriano was because of that, because he was well regarded as a player. But and then to speak of that deal, another player that they almost traded in that deal instead of Arias was Robbie Cano. Robbie Cano himself, they saw some red flags in, and they let him walk in 2013, even though a lot of fans, including me at the time, were disappointed. So they have a good eye typically for moving off guys who are productive if they don't see that personality thing matching up. Yet we see all this happening. And again, I mentioned earlier the Rodon headache this past year. You've got two instances, and who knows what else is happening behind the scenes on top of what was going on with Herman. This is just not a cultural thing that we're used to seeing with the Yankees. Not used to even when they were winning 84 games, which I know they were winning 84 games still. Even when they were winning 84 games, they're not used to seeing a cultural shift or a cultural breakdown and toxicity within the Yankees. But now you've got this stuff happening. I don't want to bring Alex Verdugo into that. I just don't. Even if it were worth it on paper, which that's even debatable, want no part of this trade. And I assume that it's a Red Sox fan who came up with that, because any Yankees fan who wants to trade Torres for Verdugo, I come on the show and debate me right now, because I don't understand that mindset at all. Similarly, going on to talking about the Yankees outfield, obviously Giancarlo Stanton is another, allegedly an outfielder. They insist on making him a full-time DH for reasons I don't understand, because his offensive production is actually better when he's in the outfield. But we had former Yankee announcer Cameron Maybin this week coming in saying that he thinks that Stanton's going to leave, not going to finish his career in New York. Thinks that basically, the way that he's handled his struggles so well in New York, in the face of all the stuff that he deals with, obviously because of what the New York media market is, and the cesspool that social media is. He believes that it's likely that he's going to end up in the Gallo, Gray, that type of, was just mentioned, Sonny Gray earlier, that list of people who, kind of rebound going somewhere else, which I could completely see happening. I could see them trying to get out of his contract by attaching a couple prospects to him and just saying, this contract is LA's problem now, or this contract is whoever. But I think it's just a general manager, or excuse me, as a general matter, rather, I don't understand the logic for fans behind, this guy is making, he's making $120 million, so I can go up to him on his private time and make death threats. Like, I know that I'm getting a little bit off of sports here right now, but to me, that's just, come on, really? Yankees fans want to wonder why people don't want to sign in New York, especially when they can get so much money. No wonder they need so much money. They're probably in therapy 3 times a week from dealing with this stuff. So, yeah, not something that I would love to see, but I can certainly see Stanton going somewhere else and rebounding. Excuse me. So, passing on from that, we've got and it was mentioned earlier, so I am coming back now to the Craig Counsell situation. So Craig Counsell, for those who don't know, he was the manager for the Milwaukee Brewers for a surprisingly long time. Not surprising that because he was successful, but just surprising in the fact that typically small market teams like that aren't super patient with and super committed to retaining good managers, even if they are good. So I was glad to see that for a while. But Mark Attanasio, the owner, once again has shot himself in the foot. He did that last year with Corbin Burns in his arbitration. He created that whole thing, which I'm sure as soon as he gets the opportunity, Corbin Burns is no longer a Brewer. But he comes out and he basically throws Counsell so far under the bus that he comes out the other side and says he lost us, he lost, a family here and one thing or another because he decided to take a better offer somewhere else. Baseball's a business. Sports is a business. It is what it is, and pretty much anybody who closely follows it knows that. Mark Attanasio, you have a net worth of $700 million freaking dollars, and you can't find it to pay Corbin Burns, Craig Counsell, any of these guys. Craig Counsell was asking for, I think it was $7 million or something like that, compared to I think it was $5 million that he was getting. He was asking for, he wanted to basically sort of reset the market for managers, which I think he was a good person in line to do. And Mark Attanasio basically said, instead of doing that, which I'm sorry, when your net worth is 700 million, and if you can afford to run, just like financially, from a financial standpoint, you can afford to run a Major League Baseball team, one of 30 Major League Baseball teams in in the USA, and one of just over 120 professional Big Four teams in the USA. In my opinion, if you can afford to do that, you can afford to spend $2 million more to keep your manager. Don't really understand that at all. I think, if anything, the team that might have gotten screwed out of this more than anybody else was the New York Mets. And not because I don't think Carlos Mendoza is a good manager. I think he's a very good man, or rather, I think he could be a very good manager. We haven't seen him yet, but I know that he was a very good assistant with Boone. I know players highly respected him. I know Boone highly respected him. And whatever people want to say, Boone was one of the best managers record-wise the last several years. And the shortcomings in the postseason, I mean, last I checked, he doesn't go up there and hit for the players. So, but outside of that, going back to Counsell, I think that if anyone got screwed by that saga, it was the New York Mets, because for a while it sounded like Stearns and Counsell was like a package deal going to the Mets. And it sounds like they basically just got used as leverage to up the price for him to go somewhere else. Going to the Cubs, I mean, the Cubs just capitalized on business. I mean, I have no issue with what the Cubs did at all. I mean, the only issue I have really with it is I don't know how well that went with David Ross. I don't know what the communication was like there. So I think, kind of got screwed also. Especially, again, if we don't know how the communication went down, because I've heard of players and coaches find out that they lost their job on ESPN or SportsCenter, which not a great look. So I'm hoping that that's not what happened. But yeah, no, I think it would be probably the Mets and David Ross. If I thought of anybody who got screwed during that, I think it'd be those two. But yeah, I look forward to seeing what happens with the Cubs. That was definitely a surprise that a lot of people didn't expect. And I'm curious to see what Milwaukee does do now that they have to replace their manager. There's been some speculation that a former player such as Ricky Weeks could be the guy. There's been speculation that certain recent former managers could get a new job there. So that's going to be fun to follow. Now, another one who, speaking of potentially coming back in baseball, there's been a lot of development over the last couple weeks regarding former Reds and Dodgers star Trevor Bauer. He was a starting pitcher who pitched for a while, won a Cy Young Award a few years ago. And I saw the last couple of weeks, I saw that he's been looking to potentially try and get back into Major League Baseball. He spent this year overseas. For those who don't know, he had 194 game suspension. It was originally a 324 game suspension. So it was over 100 games more than what A-Rod got with his infamous biogenesis suspension 10 years ago. The suspension was was after he was accused of physical violence and sexual violence against a woman who accused him. And basically what's come out in the past few weeks is, he put a story out there on Twitter. And I'm not going to, you guys, if you want to hear it, can go listen to it, because I don't want to put anything graphic on here. I want to respect anybody who is not comfortable with hearing about that. I don't think that there's a legal situation here that's currently ongoing, because he's got the appeal going, and they had a settlement that was reached. So I think that it's going to be very careful. Organizations going to have to be very careful with navigating this from a PR standpoint, because although from a legal standpoint, he seems to have been put in the clear, or at least put in a situation where what was alleged, he's in a tricky situation with that. And I'm curious to see how teams handle this, because we've seen guys get slapped on the wrist, and it's the reaction to them coming back after there's very conclusive evidence that things happened was very negative. And we've kind of got an opposite situation here, where a guy was, everything but the kitchen sink was thrown at him. And now there's suspicion, or at least less than a preponderance of evidence that perhaps the initial issue was one that materialized in the way that he was suspended for. So uh, finding this from the other perspective, I think, is going to be something that baseball's going to have to handle very carefully, because they finally got some momentum back this year in terms of popularity and attention, and I don't want to see something this significant and this serious be what screws that up. But again, it's you can't separate the the judicial system has to play out the way that it plays out, and baseball has to do its own separate entity, and they don't always operate together. I've seen players get suspended even though nothing was put together, and I've seen players who things get found legally, and it doesn't really. They get a fairly late suspension in the public eye for that. So I am curious to see what happens and if a team does take a chance on him. Excuse me. Jody Moncrief is asking me, do I want the Yankees to sign Trevor Bauer? Okay. I think that they could. I think that they would be smart to do their due diligence on it because of obviously his talent. But again, doing your due diligence means going very thoroughly before taking it, especially because I just mentioned the lightning rod of culture issues they've had the last couple of years. So I'd be very careful, especially and that's why I said I think that there's teams that have to be very careful. The Yankees are one of them. They're in a huge market. They are in the only market bigger than the one that was where Trevor Bauer was in LA last year when he was released with all this going on. So I don't think that it's a bad idea for them to do their due diligence, but again, they're going to find out a lot more than any of us are. On a pure statistical level, on a pure sports level, from what I know and what's been public, yes, I would sign up. But again, I think that that's something they have to be very careful about, and they really have to be 100% certain on that. Because I don't want to see them inviting more issues with someone if there's significant baggage there, not something that you want to associate with, especially when you're trying to rebuild that culture. You got to be extremely thorough with something like this. My concern also is on the backflip of it. I don't know how thorough it appears that the investigation was in the beginning, because for him to get the longest suspension for a player like this in MLB history, and then it to appear that there's significant evidence that suggests very little happened compared to what some of the reports were that could have happened, that's not a good look for the league either. Jody's asking me thoughts on the Padres having to get a loan to make payroll. Padres going to Padre? I mean, that's kind of the only thing. That's kind of where I'm at. I cannot think of an organization in pro sports that has taken more swings and risks. And I'll give AJ Preller this and the ownership this. They go big with their swings, and I love it because I wish more teams would do that. But holy crap, I can't think of a team that's missed on more of their big swings the last 10 years than the Padres have. I mean, even Fernando Tatis, everyone was all big on him. I was not the Tatis fan that others were. But even with him, they lost so much out of that deal so far in terms of ROI just because of either off-field issues or injury or production or one thing or another. So I'm not surprised by it, to be completely honest, that they're not in a great financial situation. I am surprised that being in San Diego, you have to get a loan to make payroll. But the fact that things are going so badly in San Diego right now, that does not surprise me. But I mean, yeah, again, there's only 124 teams in the Big Four. The fact that any of them have to get a loan to make payroll, I mean, that's stuff that you heard about that's on the level of what happened with the Montreal Expos under Jeffrey Loria before the league stepped in and moved him to DC. So I'm definitely surprised by that, and I'm curious what happens out from there. But also, I don't know how their ownership's gonna move forward with that. I know that they're talking about slashing payroll, which is really unfortunate. I never like. I don't care who the team is. I don't like hearing about teams slashing payroll because I feel like that's just unfair to the fans. I mean, especially in this day and age, going to a baseball game, especially if you're traveling and worrying about lodging, worrying about food, worrying about all this different stuff. It's not easy to go to games, and I make the same argument when it comes to load management in the NBA. It's not easy to go to games if you're an out of area fan. So the fact that players or fans are making that effort and putting those things together, and owners are basically saying, "Oh, I'm not going to make enough of a profit if I pay this guy, so I'm going to let him go to the Mets, or I'm going to let him go to the Dodgers or whatnot." Obviously I'm a Yankees, grew up as a Yankees fan, but still not something that I like to see. Excuse me. Actually, so I leaned in there to the load management with the NBA, which is a great segue into my next topic here. We've got about 15 minutes left on this one. So I'm going to go into something that came out of the NBA a few days ago. So the NBA draft, for those who don't follow NBA, the NBA draft, players can get picked out of college, and the draft occurs one night, usually in the middle of the year. It occurs one night in the off season, and there's 2 rounds, so there's 60 players who get picked. And the argument now, or at least the discussion now that's happening, is will they decide to split the draft and have 30 picks on one day, 30 picks on another day? I don't know at this time if that means that the picks, like the time to make each pick, would be stretched out, which I assume it would, but I don't know that for a fact. So I don't know exactly what the implementation process is like for that, but I do know that some of these drafts I'm watching, like especially you have the first overall pick. The Spurs last year had the first, and I don't know how long it took them to get the pick in, but if you have a first overall pick and you've got 10 minutes on the clock and you have the first overall pick, and you've had the first overall pick for, even if you made a trade to get it, you probably have had the pick for weeks, if not months. Why do you need to take 7 minutes to make that selection? That's something I've never understood. Why do you need to use so much of the time on the clock? Now, again, later in the draft, I understand, because obviously you don't know who's going to go before you, and as the rounds go on, the selection times get shorter and shorter. So I don't know typically what's going to happen. So, and I don't know how they evaluate that. But I do think that there's, we had Jimmy McMillan a few years ago who says who did the whole rent is too damn high thing. Well, pick times are too damn long, and I'll never understand why they have to be 15, 10 minutes. Because again, everyone's got a draft board, everyone's got these, all these charts, the Jimmy Johnson chart and whatnot. So I think that all of that could do to be condensed. I think that the 2 days makes sense, but my concern with that is they do the opposite and they stretch out the pick times, or this becomes an excuse for them to go to more commercials. Obviously, it's some more revenue, yada yada yada. When they are already going to what feels like 3 commercials between every pick anyway. So I am nervous that it's not going to be implemented in a great way, but I also think that in terms of following the way that the drafts go, I can see why it would be valid and valuable, but I'm not thrilled about what I imagine it turning into in that situation. Blowing up a bunch of on here, Clayton. I hope that you're enjoying the show, or we're enjoying. I hope that I'm still here. So yeah, no, I think that there's a different. Talked about load management for a second, so I'm going to go back into that. I don't understand why these players. Again, the rant that I made earlier. you don't know, fans are going to come in, and I'm willing to bet most fans trying to get to an NBA game do not understand or rather, do not have the means to just be, oh, I'm going to go to, and just, split, this amount of money for, it's not something that they can really easily do. It usually takes time, takes planning, takes money to get to a game and just have your two-star players just be like, oh, I don't feel like playing today, or oh, I feel like my toe is bugging me. My toe bugs me half the days out of the week, and you're an NBA player making all that money, and and again, I understand some of these not injuries, but some of these like ailments I understand can put you in a position where you genuinely like if you have to like run on your foot and something's going on, like I understand that part to an extent, but the returns on what they were supposedly trying to do for load management. I mean, they already got through a loophole. I think it was the Milwaukee Bucks already got through a loophole a week or two ago with I think it was Giannis. And I mean, so if one team can already find a loophole less than a month into the season, doesn't appear that their efforts to tackle it and to combat it have really worked all that well. Jody's coming in with thoughts on the in-season tournament. So the in-season tournament, again, for those who don't know, there's basically a new tournament of teams that's going to happen. I think it was in January, and again, my concern with this, and I talked a little bit about this the other day, but I'll take a little bit of a different angle. My main concern with it, I think, is, and I think it was Kurt who kind of mentioned this. What happens if a guy goes on there and is, he's playing in this game and whatnot, boom, tears his, Achilles or his meniscus goes or whatnot. Like, that would be a hard thing to swallow, I think, if I were a team, just to put on, and again, I'm sure that this is just for, additional money, additional revenue. They can sell it as like, oh, it's additional fan stuff to, they already have they've already done stuff, in the past and, for years where they've got, the All-Star weekend, they've got this contest and that competition and one thing or another. I am glad that they're making the switch back with the All-Star game that they're making though. But although on that note, I do think that going USA versus World is kind of a fun arrangement compared to some of what they've done recently. But I think if you have a player significantly get injured during that period of time, whether it's during the game or just these injuries that happen in between, I think that's going to be especially now. Again, I go back to what I said about Michigan. I talked about Michigan earlier. Excuse me. Going back to Michigan earlier, the difference that they had, the disparity that I'm concerned about with if this happens to Michigan or Ohio State or one of these Big Ten teams or one of these big, not big market, but like big brand teams, I guess you'd say, or organizations, I guess you'd say. My concern about that is if that if this happens to a number 12 guy on somebody's roster or somebody like that, it's going to be like, oh crap, that's sad that happened. The minute this happens to a Jokic or a LeBron or a Wemby or whatnot, the league's going to radically, because again, the stars run the NBA more so than, in my opinion, probably any other league in the Big Four, and it might not even be all that close. So knowing that, I can just see a scenario in which some of these, I hate to call them this, but no-name players, if you want to say, get hurt, and it just kind of becomes one of those aw shucks types of moments. But then someone going out there and a Giannis or, excuse me, one of my guys, Zion, because it seems like he gets hurt every time he gets out of bed. It doesn't help, I think, to have that idea out there, but that is just exactly that is what I can see happening, and I'm curious how they would sort of reconcile that, because that's going to be a sticky situation, tough tightrope for them to walk. I apologize. Next question from Jody. Don't all the games count towards the 82-bit championship game? I'll have to look into that, Jody. That is something that I admittedly don't know offhand. I believed that that was a separate entity. If it is connected, then obviously my answer from earlier would change. Excuse me. I don't see that there's any comments that I missed, but if someone else does, I got about 4 minutes and change left. So if someone else does want to come in, I am glad to talk more about anything that anyone else wants to hear. But no, I don't think that there's a situation in which the NBA or any sport at this point, it's obviously going to be tailored to the stars. It's going to be tailored to the people bringing the most money, people bringing the most revenue. But I think that, again, and I'll end it the way that I started with Michigan. They have to get their process. I don't care who they are. They have to get their process. Didn't love the way that this whole thing played out. I love that they won today for, over Penn State. I love that their coach was, on saying, oh, we won this for him, and, the emotional video that was circulating. But they've got to, excuse me, if they do, I hope that they are successful if they do pursue trying to get recourse for this in the event that they are not provided the process that they should get. Because I'm never, and again, I'll say what I've said this with Bauer as well. I don't love the idea that you get suspended while you're working through things. I think that it's incumbent upon the league that you're on or the team that you're on or both to go out and say, hey, we've got this evidence against you that you did this bad thing that hurts the team or hurts the league or just hurts humanity in general, depending on how bad it is. I don't love the idea that it's, hey, we have one report that you may have done something, so you're out. Like, I think that it's incumbent upon them to go out and find that research and do that research, do that investigation, do their, as I said earlier, the phrase, do their due diligence. I don't personally believe that there's a strong argument in favor of doing it the way where they're just let's keep them on. And again, because it's Michigan, there's going to be an argument not only for the brand but for the competition of the game, because again, Michigan's a hot team right now. They're one of the higher ranked teams in the country. There's going to be implications on competition, but moreover on that, he's still coaching during the week, and he's just not. So even if you're doing that, it almost kind of just looks at like we felt like we had to do something, but we also didn't want to go too aggressive. Which, if you take it from 30,000 feet, I almost kind of find a worse look than if they had just done it outright, because I don't understand. It's like they acknowledge that they don't want to affect the integrity or the games, but they also want to make it look like they're doing something to the fans who this is up to. Like, so it's like they're trying to almost play to both sides, which to me just feels very political and trying to be PC and whatnot, and not actually getting to the heart of everything, which is, of course, the facts. I mean, I know that they're in Detroit and Ann Arbor area, so I don't know, maybe in terms of sign stealing, if Jody's watching, maybe AJ Hinch can have something to talk about. Who knows? All right, I'm not seeing any further comments, and it is about 1 minute to 9 o'clock, so I don't want to stay on past the buzzer here. But guys, I want to thank you all very much for tuning in to episode 1 of What's the Scoop. I want to thank the many people who came on to talk about not only my version of the inside scoop, but also what was the different topics brought up. Thank Jody, thank you, Kurt and Kenny, for coming on. We've got Keith Brugman just coming on right now. He's saying, "Hey Scoops, Keith, how you doing, buddy? It's good to see you." I want to thank Clayton and excuse me, everybody else, Jay, and everybody else who was on. I'm sorry if I missed anybody by name, but again, thank you guys really from the bottom of my heart for coming on for the first episode here. I look forward to seeing you all again next week, and we have a lot more to talk about as the offseason continues on. Another week of football will be around to talk about. I'm looking forward to it. And obviously, if anybody has any interest in coming on as a guest in the future, like I said, this is going to be a rotating thing. So please feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk about a topic that either I have covered or one that I haven't covered. This is going to be an exciting show, and I want it to be as interactive as possible. So I want to thank you all very much, and have a great weekend. And as I said earlier, go Veterans, Happy Veterans Day, rather. And thank you guys so much for everything that y'all do and for your service. And God bless you. Thank you very much.